So once again, good morning everyone, and welcome back to AWP lecture sessions. We are continuing here. In a previous session, we started with advanced AngularJS details unit, and we started with modules. We looked at app module. We looked at controller module also. So we define a module and we bind a controller. Then we looked at some directives. So ng app and ng controller is the directive that we use to bind those app and controller module to the application. And then we looked at number of different directives like ng init, ng model, right, ng repeat, and so on. And at the end of the previous session, we were discussing about creating our own directive. So it's very simple. We can use directive method of the Angular application object. So whatever your app object is, you use directive method and you give it a name. Make sure that this is a camel case version, and then you populate a function which contains or which returns the template of your view part. So that template is nothing but the HTML code, or as well as it can contain your AngularJS code also. So that's the entire template. Now this template is going to replace your directive in the view. Okay. Now how do we use this directive in the view part? So in the view, we can use this directive using tag name, or using class name, or using attribute, or using comments, anything. But make sure this camel case naming conversion, you are going to separate out your words with hyphen sign when you are using that directive. Okay. So my example directive becomes my hyphen example hyphen directive when you use it. And this is the example which covers it or which uses it by tag name. You can also go for class name, attribute also. Now by default, all the user-defined directives will be accessible through through the element, means tag name, or the attribute. Okay, so the first two examples, either you can have it using the tag name itself, so entire element, or the attribute way. Now if you want to let's say limitize that thing, if you say that my directive must be used with only element, means tag name, no other way anyone can access that thing. If you want to have those kind of constraints, then you can achieve that thing by defining restrict property within your directive, and that property will have value either E or A, E for element, A for attribute, C for class, and so on, right? So if you restrict it to E, then you will only be able to access that directive in your view with element name. So now this is all about user-defined directive. Let's jump into the example that we have created in a previous session, and let us look to that thing now. Okay, so moving to the development environment we are using here. And if you remember, we have created this message using our own directive. So we have defined that directive here in the app module file, right? And this is the app object dot directive we have defined, and then we have given the example by my example directive, and we return a template with this message. And this my example directive we use in our view using tag name here. So this is my example directive separated by hyphens, and because of this thing, we can have a look at this message on the browser page. Now, right now, we are using that directive as HTML element name, tag name. I can also do this instead of going for this thing. I can have div element instead of entire separate element. I have a div element, but as an attribute, let's say I define this name. Okay. Then also I can have that directive on the page. So we have it 2 times because we are using it twice here, right? So we access that directive using tag name or the element. We access that using the attribute also, and that's what happening. We have 2 messages, same messages at this place. But now let's say if I want to restrict this thing, let's say only tag name or the element name is allowed. No one can access my directive using this attribute. Then we can do that thing by having extra restrict property here, restrict property, and we give it a value. So if I say capital E, that defines the E only, element only. Okay, when I restrict to element, then we have only one message, and this is coming from tag name element. Wherever we have used attribute, that's not being displayed, right? So instead of having 2 messages, now we have only one. So what happens is this is being rendered on the browser page because of element, but this is simply neglected. This attribute is simply neglected because we have restricted our directive to be used with element name. Now, if I go and define, let's say, attribute capital A here, then also you'll have only one message at this place, okay? Because now this message is coming, this message is coming from this attribute directive, and this tag is not being rendered on the browser page, okay? Now, let's say if you want to have it using class name, then you can also define it by, let's say I want to use my attribute with class name, so I'll say restrict C. Then none of the messages will be there on the browser page because none of these 2 is using class. If I use class here, let's say at this place, if I use class, then it is going to be rendered and we'll have that message. So there are multiple ways of accessing your user-defined directives. Now it depends on your coding convention and what kind of coding you want in your application. Majorly, the element name and attribute names are used to receive the entire directive or entire template, right? But sometimes, let's say, based on a class applied on your element, right? On your element, you want to have a different templates for that element. I want to have a div, one division here, right? I want to have one division here. And based on the class name, let's say, I want to have the look and feel. I want to render this part. Now, rendering this part will have number of inbuilt structural elements, H1, H2, paragraph or something. So based on a class, if you want to render this part, then you may also go for class directives, where class will be applied based on some business logic, and whatever class is being applied here, you will have that kind of structure on the page. So that can also be useful at those point of times. You can also go for defining directives and using those directives based on a class name, right? So that's what that's the remaining part we were not able to complete in the previous session, and we do it today. So that's all about directives, and there are plenty of directives. Yesterday we discussed. And we'll be using some of those directives while we will be working with forms and when we will create a single page application at the end of this unit. But the list of directives is very much lengthier, and you can refer those directives from the official documentation of AngularJS. Few examples are ng-click. All the events in HTML, we have a directive in AngularJS. So for click event, we have ng-click directive. For blur event, we have ng-blur directive. For submit event, we have ng-submit directive, and so on. Mouse click, DBL click, key up, key press, key down, and all those events, we have directives in the AngularJS. Right? So that's what the directives are. We may use directives to bind our data with the model. We may use directives to initialize something. We may use directives to define an application. We may use directives to define controllers, or we may use directives to define our own templates. So directives are nothing but an additional attribute or a tag name structure that we can use along with our view, where AngularJS is going to interpret those directives, and it will work based on the directive that we want, right? So that's all about directives. Now going back to presentations now, presentation slide. Let's move on and have a look at the next thing. Filters. Now, filters as a topic, it is not being given in your syllabus file. GTU has not written as a topic filters, but I believe that we should cover this thing. It's a very important thing. In AngularJS, it is called filters. In Angular, so from version 2.0 and later, it has been called pipes. Okay, it simply filters out or gives you some kind of sorting operations and all those things on your data when you display it. It's not going to affect your data, but it is just going to affect the display, or wherever you are going to display your content. The display purpose filterization you can achieve using the number of filters available in the AngularJS. Even we can define our own filter if we want, because filter is nothing but kind of a functionality or the code that should be executed to change the look and feel, to change the behavior of your data or something. So we can also define our user-defined filter. That's nothing but a function, and we can use that function name as a filter also, right? So we'll see that, but let us see what are the inbuilt filters we have. And the list that you are looking at your screen right now, it's the inbuilt filters available in AngularJS. So like uppercase, it's simply going to convert your text into all caps, okay? Uppercase. And similarly, lowercase is going to convert your text in the all small letters, lowercase. Then there is a number. So you can define a format of number to string, and so on. Then there is a currency filter. So it's going to format your data as a currency. So you can have a currency notation, like let's say US dollar or Indian rupees, INR, USD. You can prefix those things before your amount. Then there is a date filter, which is going to format your data, which is the date data actually. And at the time of displaying that date, you define a specific format there. So that's the date filter. A simple filter, user-defined filter we can use, which is going to filter the items from array, maybe. Then JSON filter, it is going to display your JSON data in a proper JSON string format, not a normal string, but it is going to display your object or the JSON string with proper structurization, curly bracket, then new line, then property colon value, comma, property colon value, and on the new line again closing bracket, and so on. So it's going to format your JSON string. Then limit to. Limit to is going to limit your number or string up to the given length or the characters or whatever you say. Even your array you can limit to. In your original array you have 10 elements, but let's say if you want to display first 3 elements only, then you can use limit to 3. So from array only 3 elements will be displayed, and so on. Then there is order by, which is going to order your data for the display purpose only. Remember, it is going to order your data and then it is going to display it. So we can use any of these filters alongside the expression where we are displaying our data, right? We have a few examples also, but what we'll do is we will directly look these examples on the practical page we have created here, right? So let us see some of these filters on the page. The first one was the uppercase and lowercase, first two, right? So let me have, or for example, let's go to some messages. Let's say person message. Now this person 6ed1 class is coming from where? From your root object, right? Root scope, where we have 6ed1 capital and class small letters. But now let's say at this place, if I use that filter, now how do we use that filter? So to use any of the filters, what we do is wherever we are having a data expression, after that we use pipe operator, and then we define our filter, right? So when I do this thing, I display my data of a person property with uppercase. Now when I save this thing, remember 6ed1 is already capital, but class is a small letter. But when I save this thing, it is going to change it to the capital letters. So class has been changed to the capital letters. Look, your data is not being changed. Your data is as it is. Just for the display purpose, you are filtering your data. You are changing your data behavior, right? So that's the first example. Uppercase. Instead of uppercase, you may also go for lowercase. Okay. Now let me remove this thing first and save. So our class is lowercase, but ed is the capital. Now if I want to have everything in the lowercase, then we can define a lowercase filter here, and ed will be small letters. So very basic example of using a simple uppercase and lowercase filter, right? If I go for uppercase again, then entire data will be uppercase. So that was one thing. Next, let's have a look at the currency, right? For that, let me go to the end of our page. At the end, let's have a paragraph which will have my amount, right? And let us go and define this amount. This should be outside the controller, so it must be in the root scope, right? So we go to our app, and here let us define the amount. And let's have 123.34. Okay. So this is the amount. And now if I go here and save this part, then I'm going to have that number on the page here, 123.34. This is the simple number, simple amount it is being displayed. What if I want to prefix this thing with the INR or USD or something? Now, if I want to do that, then what we can do is we can use the filter, so pipe operator, and then we define this is a currency, colon, and then we give it the prefix order. So this is Indian rupees, let's say INR. Now, when I save this thing, it is going to prefix my amount with that notification, INR. So when you say it's a currency and you give it a currency prefix, it is going to do that for you. Your data is 123.34 only. It's the number. But when you display that number as a currency, you'll have this prefix. Now, there is one more thing. Let's say when you calculate your amount, okay, if mathematically, let's say you are going to calculate your amount, and mathematics, computer has a higher precision, and it goes for more than 2 numbers accuracy. So let's say somehow on the calculation basis you have 34630. This is what the amount you have received, right? Then it is by default going to change it. When you define it is a currency, it is by default going to change it to the rounding part, right? So that's one thing. But let's say explicitly you want to go for more numbers of decimal digits here. Then you can do it by having another colon after your prefix, and you define the digits, number of digits you want. So explicitly, if you define this thing, then after decimal point, you have those number of digits. And default decimal digits are 2. Let's say if you want 1 only, then you can also define 1. It's going to round off your amount, and then it will display it. So whatever you want, you can achieve that thing. So that's the currency filter. Next, let's say we want to have a date filter. Let's say we have a date, and we are going to have this date in our root scope. Let's say root scope date, and let's have a current date. So we can have it with new date object, right? So when we have this thing, a date object, entire a date object, and we display that date object here, then we'll have this thing. This is the full date. We have date, day, month, year, right? Then we have a time also, and the time zone and all those things, right? Now, let's say we don't want to display this entire date format. Let's say I just want to have this date only, and not in this format. The format that we follow will have first DD, then MM, and then YYYY. So that's what the format I want to change at this place. So we can do it by, let's say first we say this is a date. Okay, the first thing, the only thing that I give on my object property, when I filter it as a date, then it's going to give me the short date, January 5th, 2021, short date. But for example, let's say I don't like this format, I want to have my format, then I can, or we can define those formats by having colon sign and giving a format. For example, dd slash but remember all these formats are the standard formats. For date, only day you have small d, for your month you have capital M, and year again you have small y. And 4-digit year, if I say I want, then this is how I can give it a format, and we have that format here. So these are kind of a placeholders for your data, and whatever format you define here, you can achieve those things, right? So that's another example of filter, date filter, right? Then let's say you want to have a JSON filter. Now we have already initialized our faculties with the array having JSON objects, right? These are the JSON objects. Or let's say if you go for some other subjects array, this is the array, and inside that array you have all these JSON objects, curly bracket, property and a value, property and a value. So you can also define those things. Or let's say if you don't want to go for entire array, let's say you just want to have a normal example, of one object here, JSON object here. JSON format will be a single curly bracket and then name and value property. So let's say here I say that ID is 001 and name is, let's say, Tejas. And now if I save this thing, okay, this expression is going to display my object data. But this JSON JavaScript object notation is a simple string, nothing else. So it is displaying that normal string at this place, right? But what if I say that I don't want to display this as a simple string, I want to display this as a JSON data? Then we can do it by using our filter, pipe operator, and define JSON, right? Well, it should work. I don't know, JSON, yeah. It's not being displayed properly at this place. Or let's have entire object here, if possibly we can do that thing. Well, no. At this place right now, JSON filter is not working, but if it works properly, then what it gives us is, it gives us a proper JSON representation of the data, right? That's why we have this JSON filter. Maybe this filter has been removed from this version or so, I don't know right now, but that's what happens, okay? That's the JSON filter. Then let's have a look at normal filter. Let's go and use it. Let's go and use it on the subjects here. I want to filter out these subjects based on the subject name, okay? Based on the subject name. Now, where we are listing all these things, so this is where we list all those things. A subject in all the subjects, we are going to repeat. Now, generally filter, normal filter is used with these repeats, because when we have number of data and we want to filter out that data, we use normal filters, simple filters. So that we can do using pipe operator at this place, where we are repeating something, subject in subjects, and then we are going to filter, okay, filter that based on a criteria. Let's say my criteria is AWP. I want to filter my subjects with this criteria. Now, when I save this thing, look, earlier we were having all the subjects here, but now when I filter it, then we'll have only one subject, AWP. So it is filtering the data based on the criteria, right? Now, if I only have A, then what it gives me is the subject that contains, okay, subject that contains A anywhere. Look, simple AWP is also the filterization based on any of the property or any of the data. If any of the code contains AWP, then also it will be displayed here. And the name is AWP, then also it is being displayed here, right? So if I say that only C, let me show you the subjects. Now this is what the subjects we have. And if I define filter C, then what do you think? What will be displayed on the output screen? Can anyone give any answer on the chat? Let me show you first the example of A. Look, when we write AWP, we were having only this subject because of AWP matched at this place. When we write simple A, then A we have at multiple places, and these two subjects were displayed. Yes, Darpit, your answer is correct. If I write C, then C is in CD, as well as C is there on the subject codes. And that's why if I save this filter C, we are going to have all the subjects. Because this simple filter is going to match any of the property within your data. Any of the property within your entire data. And wherever it gets matched, it is going to display those things. Now, if you say that, oh, I want to have a filter, but I want to apply that filter on subject name only, then we can define our function. And within that function, we can return true or false. And based on that true or false value here, it is going to display, right? It's going to display those things. So we will see this filtering when we create a single page website. And what I plan is I want to, let's say I am planning to have address book website as a single page website. We are going to create an address book. Now you might have number of addresses available. So at first you are going to display all those persons on your page. But later on, let's say you want to filter based on a city or based on the state or something, right? Then we will apply those filters here. And at that time, I'll show you how we can create our own filter, and those filters will only work on either person state or person city or person name. So that we will do later on. But this is how we apply filters. Now, right now, what is happening? Let's say if I have normal simple A, okay, or if I have simple C, we can also say that explicitly. We say that we want to match this C. Then, if I write false, then it is having part of the data, and if I say true, then it will compare the entire data. So it's kind of a substring or a full string, right? So let's have an example of A here. A and false. Now false means it is comparing a substring. A as a substring anywhere within your data. Then we have AWP Advanced Java. But let's say A as a full string, then we'll have nothing here, right? We will have nothing here. So for example, if you have subjects like web programming and advanced web programming, or let's say advanced web programming 2, right? We have advanced web programming and advanced web programming 2. And here, if I say that advanced web programming false, then it is going to give me both the subjects, AWP and AWP2. But let's say I don't want to have this second advanced web programming. Then I'll say that I want AWP to be as a full string. Then it's going to give me the AWP only. Second part of AWP will not be displayed here. So that's a filter on your data. And for just the display purpose, you can apply these filters when you are displaying all your data on the screen, right? So that's one example of filter. Then there was one more filter, order by. So let's say we have this data being displayed here, and let me go to that repeat place here, faculty in faculties, and we are displaying all the faculties here. Let's say I want to sort this faculty data. Then we'll have pipe operator, and we say order by, and then we are going to give the order by which, whether I'm going to order it by faculty ID or faculty name. So let's say we want to sort it with faculty name. Then based on the name, we will have that data sorted. Look, Tejas was the first faculty, being 100 ID. Second one was Ashish, and third one was Kavita. But when we order it with first name, F name here, then we have Ashish, then Kavita, and then Tejas, right? Now, if I say that I want to sort it using ID, faculty ID, then maybe order with FID, and we'll have 100, 101, 103, and so on. So we can sort our data with any criteria here. And we'll be using this order by filtering in that single page address book also. So what I believe, let's say we will have all the persons listed in a table. So we'll have a person name, we'll have a, let's say, state, or let's say city, state, and country, and all those things. And we'll have that data in a table. Now, sometimes I want to sort that table data with name. Sometimes, let's say, I want to sort that table data with city, or sometimes I want to sort that data with country or state. So at that place, we'll be using this order by filter, and we are going to sort our entire table data based on the required criteria, right? So we will also do that thing in that application. So that's what the order by filter, right? Any confusion or question till now in the filters? We have seen number of filters. We have seen uppercase, lowercase, date, then normal filtering your array or filtering your data, order by filter, and so on. Any question or doubt till now? Well, in that case, let's continue for the next topic. That's the services. Now, services was actually the topic of the previous unit, but now I want to cover at this place place, because we have seen number of things to represent our data, right? And now we can go for services, and with services we can have some data and we can display those data on the page. That's why I kept this point to cover later on. And let's have those services covered now. Now, services is nothing but simple function which will perform some task, and we can have that function at whatever place, and whenever we want to call it, we can call it. It's just like on behalf of you, other person is doing some task, so that person is providing a service to you. That's the same fundamentals behind this thing. So even AngularJS also gives you some kind of services which you can use there. Now in AngularJS there are about 30 or so built-in services. You can explore those services on the AngularJS documentation, official documentation. What we'll do here is we are going to use some of those services, and we are going to see how we can use those services. So let's say location service we will see, and route service we will see, because when we have number of views, templates, based on a route, we are going to load those templates and display those things. Then HTTP service. So that's a simple service which can send HTTP request to the server and receive the data. So HTTP service is there. Then there are timeout and interval services also. It's simple JavaScript timeout and JavaScript set interval methods, right? So those are few services. We will cover those services and we'll have a look at how it can be done. Now remember, in order to use any of the service, you must define, or you must have that service as a dependency in your controller. So within your controller, when you write a function, just like you pass in scope as a parameter, you also need to pass in these services as a parameter. And that defines the dependency, right? So let's have a look at the first example, location service. Remember what I said? If you want to use any of the services, then you need to give that service as a dependency in your controller function. So when you define your controller, and in that controller function, you must have that service dependency. Now once you have that thing, you can use that thing directly. So location is a service, and we can use location, and then we can look, location is one kind of an object. From that object you can extract whatever thing you want. So if you say absolute URL, then it is going to give you the entire URL of the current web page, right? A very simple example. And very quickly, let's have a look at this thing, location service. Fine. So I'm going to go back to the sorry. Yeah, going back to the code here. And let's say after this JSON data, or let's say we go to this thing in our controller. In this controller, let us have a paragraph, and we want to have our URL here. Sorry. URL is simple text, and then I want to have that my URL. So right now we have URL and then nothing. because my URL is not the property or the object defined in your scope. So let's do that thing now. We go to our controller, and at this place, what we want is we want to have our scope, and that scope will have my URL property. Now what I want here is I want to use my location service, but if I want to use it, I must define this as a dependency first in the function. So whatever controller function I have, along with scope, I'll define location service as a dependency, right? And then I'm going to use location dot absolute URL, right? So this location is the object, and then absolute URL is the method, which is going to give you the absolute URL of your current page. So the current page is this thing on a local host 127.0.0.1, 5500 port. I have index3.html resource. So that's what we have. It's the HTTP protocol, localhost 5500 port, and we are accessing index3.html right now. This is the entire absolute path. You can explore this location object. You can simply console.log that object, and you can have a look at that entire object. So let's do that thing once here. Console dot let's say we are going to log this location object. Right now you will not have much thing in that, but this is what the entire location object we have. You can extract a simple host from that thing. This is the ABS URL, absolute URL that we have accessed right now. Okay, you can access only host, or you can parse that thing and you can access number of things from that thing, and that entire URL. So we will be using this location service when we go for routes, and when we have some extra information in the URL, like get request, and we have some data in the URL, and we want to extract those data from the URL. We will be using this location service later on. Okay, so that's one thing, location service. Another service is the timeout service. So let's say it's simply JavaScript timeout. You set a timeout, and once it gets over, you want to perform something. Now, as long as it is a service, you need to have that service dependency in the controller function. So $timeout. And once you have that thing, you can use that thing $timeout. It is going to have two parameters. First one will be the function that you want to execute. And the second parameter is the time in milliseconds, right? So 2000 is actually 2 seconds. So after 2 seconds, it is going to execute this function. Okay, after 2 seconds, it is going to execute your function. That's how you set your timeout. So for example, let's say we go to our our page, and in this controller we have person defined MEFGI, right? And we display that thing here. Welcome MEFGI. So this is the person data. Now let's say I want to display MEFGI for 2 seconds or 3 seconds, and after those 2 or 3 seconds, I want to change this data. Okay, after 2 or 3 seconds, I want to change this name to something else. In that case, we can have that timeout service. So first of all, let's define it as a dependency here. So $timeout. Okay. And then let us use this timeout service in our controller, right? It is going to have two parameters. First one will be the function, and second one is going to be the time in milliseconds. So let's say 2000, so 2 seconds actually. And now in this function, what we want to do is I just want to change this data. Instead of MEFGI, let me do it Marwari University. So when I save this thing, for 2 seconds, I'll have this MEFGI. Oh, and after 2 seconds, it has been changed to Marwari University. Let me refresh this page one more time. So we have MEFGI, and then after 2 seconds, we have Marwari University. So that's a simple timeout. For some reason, let's say you want to display some content on your page, and you want it to be displayed for 5 seconds or 10 seconds only, and after that, you want to remove it from your page. So you can have this timeout. Okay, you set your content and display it, and you set your timeout to 10 seconds or 15 seconds, whatever you want. And when it gets over, you execute this function, and in this function, what you do is you remove that content, you remove that element from your entire page. So when user visits your website, initially for 5 to 10 seconds, one message will be displayed, and then it will be removed. So that's what you can achieve using timeout. So that's the timeout. The timeout service. Then another one, well, we also have timeout notification right now. It's 10:57. So let's conclude this session at this place. We are discussing services, and in the services section, we have seen location service, and we have seen timeout service. In the next lecture, we will see interval service, we will see HTTP service, and different ways how we can use HTTP service to receive some data online. And then we will also see the custom services. What if I want to define my own service, right? So that will be the content we will go for in the next lecture. So that's it for today. Let me have a confirmation on your attendance, and then we'll conclude. We'll leave this session. Yeah, I have it. So thank you everyone for being the part of this session. Hopefully in next lecture, we'll complete this services part, and then we'll move on to routes. So if you have any doubt today, you may ask, or else you may leave this meeting now. Thank you. See you in the next one.